And I talked to the folks about the summit, and we talked about what I could talk about. And they said, you can talk about people. The weakest link, people. I got really excited. I spent the last 8 years building innovation programs at different companies. And I got really into this idea of high-performing organizations and culture and how it drives everything we do. And in particular, how does it drive innovation? And the panel this morning, the first panel, you heard a lot about that, about culture and how, whether it's centralized or decentralized, and how do business units, and I know at our roundtable we had lots of discussion around this. Well, at the end of the day, you have to have great people. If you don't have great people, you can't execute, right? Well, A players want to work with A players. They want to work with companies that actually are really focused on really big problems, right? So that's what I want to talk about tonight. I'm going to talk about the journey. You have to have a story. I don't know if storytelling is going to be part of the sessions, but you have to be a really good storyteller to attract those people and retain the great people you have. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking through a little bit of an academic presentation, but then I'm going to actually turn it into what I've actually done at AARP over the last 3 years and show you in reality how this plays out. We'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So that was a great lead-in, all the crazy technology you just saw on the innovation. Right? Today, innovation's everywhere. I talk about ideas are free. Ideas are everywhere. Right? There's no new ideas. There's just combinations and permutations of ideas that get you to these new big things. Right? But as innovation or innovators, we think about this stuff. And we often chase this stuff, right? How many times in the last year have you heard AI? Cloud computing. Pick your flavor of thing up here. And we tend to chase these things, and that's not the way to do it. Chasing technology is not going to get you where you need to be, right? You see a startup, they're doing some really cool thing, and we got to come, you go back to the office, we got to do this. It's really hard, right? I think Alp talked about embrace the outside, don't try and rebuild everything, right? But you still need people to do that. So I'd urge you not to focus on this. 3 simple questions we're going to ask today. The first starts with this. Why? Why innovate? What's your impact? What are you trying to accomplish? At AARP, it's simple. I'm assuming everyone here knows AARP. Anyone not know AARP? All right. If I asked you what we do, I'd get 10 different answers. I'd get we're an insurance company. I'd get, you're an advocacy policy shop. You're a deals and coupons, early bird special company. The answer is yes to all those things. But at the heart, we're a social mission-driven organization. What's our impact? Every single day I get up and I have to think about how do I impact lives, right? We have metrics. We talk about souls impacted, lives impacted. That's why I innovate. That's what my team does. We think about this. So what's your impact? Why are you innovating? Seems simple, but if you think about that, you may actually not know. Right? At our roundtable today, I heard a whole bunch of different things, and it didn't seem like there was alignment across different organizations on why you're innovating. So that's the first thing you need to ask yourself. Second is, what's your mission? And there's a difference between your impact and your mission. So AARP, trying to impact as many lives as I can around the world. Our mission is really simple. And our mission drives every single thing we do. Right? The mission is we need to empower people to choose how they live as they age. I'm going to say it again. We empower people to choose how they live as they age. So those of you that know AARP, we're an old people company, right? Anywhere in that mission statement did it say old people? Because every single person in this room is aging every second. So I'm trying to empower all of you to live your best lives, thereby by impacting all of you in some way, shape, or form. This is really, really important. Now, as the guy leading innovation and product, it's also really helpful because that's a pretty broad statement, right? Pretty much anything I want to do. Not really. When we look at our group, or our organization, we call them issue areas. They're kind of the equivalent of a business unit. We have things like caregiving, savings and planning, work and jobs, healthy living, livable communities. So underneath this idea of empowering people to choose how they live as they age, as the guiding, the beacon, if you will, I do have these silos where I can play. But it all ladders up. Impact and mission, right? All this, your mission doesn't matter unless you know why you're innovating. Two major types of innovation, right? The first is incremental. I heard a lot of incremental today, at least at our roundtable. I didn't hear a lot of transformation. Incremental is when inside of a business unit, workflow, process improvement, that sort of thing, and super important. If you can figure out how to move this from here to here and it saves 10 cents, but you do it 1,000,000 times a day, that's pretty important, pretty powerful. Well, the thing with incremental, people think it's easy. It's not easy, right? I love this image. Coming up with a bigger fishbowl, probably not that hard. But there's inherent risk in innovation, whether it's incremental or it's transformational. We still got to get the goldfish safely over here, right? So keep that in mind, and it's okay to have incremental innovation. But keep in mind the type of people that do well at this do not do well at this. This is all the whiz-bang. I'll bring you back to the first slide. This is all the fun stuff, right? I often talked about when you're doing transformational innovation, it's really, really, really hard. I'll argue almost impossible to do inside of business units. There's misalignment everywhere, right? Heard a lot about it this afternoon through our roundtables. You almost have to have, I call it cool kid club, right? It's a horrible thing, and I'm going to say that intentionally because I want to talk about culture, right? And if you run around your organization and you're cool kid club, what does it do to the culture? What does it do to the people you're trying to train, the people you're trying to attract? So I say that because it feels like that sometimes, but you have to do everything in your power not to have it be that, right? And it's hard. So figure out which one you want to do, and you can do both, by the way, and I will argue you should do both. Maybe. But at the end of the day, success or failure is 100% tied to your greatest asset. And my guess is if I asked all of you before this slide, what is the greatest asset inside of your organization? A good chunk of you would not say people. Right? You'd say your tech, you'd say your customers, you'd say whatever, some proprietary IP. At the end of the day, the greatest asset we all have is our people. So with that comes culture. And this is where the storytelling, you have to create the story, right? You want to inspire people. You want them to line up. They just have to come work with you, and they have to come be part of your team, whether they're internal or they're external. And you have to tell a story. Everyone knows Peter Drucker's quote, culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Very, very true. Culture can erode everything you do just like that. How do you talk to the community or to a prospective candidate about your culture? Like, what do you say? How do you describe culture? Right? I know I'm an entrepreneur at heart, done a bunch of startups, and cultures, we got the beer cart on Fridays, or we have a ping pong table, and we have foosball, and that's not culture. Those are things, right? It may start to make it feel fun, which could be part of your culture. I would highly suggest to all of you, if you're into culture, a friend of mine, Dharmesh Shah, happens to be the founder and CTO at HubSpot. And he was trying to chronicle, if you don't know HubSpot, it was a startup out of MIT that grew, went public. He was trying to chronicle how they created culture from like employee one to going public. And he created this great slide deck. It's out there. It's viewed, 8 million times. And it's really, really well done to see how you chronicle culture and how do you create a slide deck that you can put in front of someone to say, here's what our culture is, and here's why it's important, here's what it means to work at HubSpot, right? You have to figure out how to do that. How do you tell the story? And it's not just external, it's internal. Part of that is because when people look at you, they only see up here. They only see half the story, right? Really, really good people want to solve really, really hard problems. At AARP, we call them BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals. We create these goals for every project we do. I tell my team, everyone here have like in your bonuses, like IPO, MPO, objective stuff. So I tell my team, if you ever hit your IPO, you're fired. You weren't thinking big enough. I'm not going to penalize you for it, but you think big, right? Think really big. People will get so excited about that idea that we're going to solve the world's problems. Anyone ever says they're chasing dollars, if they ever come to you and they want to know, like, what's my upside potential? Run. They're the wrong people. Even though folks like myself that are entrepreneurs at heart and we want to break rules and we want to run fast and we want to do all these things, we still want some level of structure. And then we still got to know a process. We still want to know, if I do this, I'm going to get that. Think of it in terms of venture investing, milestone-based investing. I get a little bit of money, and then if I achieve X, I get Y, right? So we still have a process. We have to think about a process. People still want some structure, right? I'm going to give you a real quick story around internal infrastructure, and this is going to sound super petty, but it's a personal story. So I've started 6 companies. Every one of them we were a Mac shop. So I've used a Mac for as long as I can remember. Took a job at AARP. Didn't even think about it. Go to work my first day. There's a PC sitting on my desk. And I'm not knocking anyone PC lovers in the room, but I'm a true Mac fanboy. And I said, what is this? This is a deal breaker. I was ready to leave my job. I was not going to use a PC. So now we actually have PCs. Partially thanks to me, but not entirely. But it was a thing for me. I wasn't about to go to some place that wasn't even interested in having flexibility to give people an option. Simple little thing, but a big impact for me. Top-down leadership, the CEO, the executive team, the senior leadership team, they all have to be singing from the same song sheet, right? Especially the bigger the organization, the harder this is. And at the end of the day, and this came up earlier a couple times, the most important thing you can do for people is empower them. Literally, you have to get out of the way. I talked about in earlier, when all of you got asked what your daily jobs, I was laughing, because if you ask me my daily job, I'm a snowplow. I literally am a snowplow. I'm like, God, just clear the way, right? And so that's how I think about it. You have to definitely empower your people. So how does this translate to AARP, and how does it translate to real life? So I'm going to share the story with you. It starts back in 1958. This may be a big surprise for some of you, but our founder, a woman named Dr. Ethel Percy Andrews, was an educator. She had heard about a friend of hers who had come on hard times, and she got an address for this woman, and she went to go visit her. She went to the home, she knocked on the door, and a woman comes to the door, and it's not her friend. And her woman says, no, she lives out back. So Ethel walks out back, looks, and it's a chicken coop. Walks up to the chicken coop, and lo and behold, her friend of many years is living in the chicken coop in total squalor. And so Ethel's trying to understand what's going on. And her friend says, well, I'm spending all of my money on my health care. So Ethel started the first ever group health insurance, 1958. So we, much like every startup, right, we started with an innovative founder. And much like those little startups that get really big, you stagnate over time. Like I often talk about the Kodak moment, Blockbuster. Many companies we can look at as the ones not to follow. But we became stagnant. And in 2015, Joanne Jenkins was the new CEO, and she said, I have an idea, a vision. I want an army of what she calls everyday innovators in aging. I started in 2016. And I wasn't quite sure what this meant. You want an army of everyday innovators in aging, okay. So we talk about it, and she's like, I want every single employee of AARP, all 2,200 of them, to be innovators. All right. I don't really know what that means. So we thought, what's the first thing we can do? You want to, in the culture, we're a nonprofit, right? And so the culture is just not, people aren't getting up every day and figuring out how to be innovative. They're figuring out every day and how to do social good. So the first thing we did is we built a 20,000 square foot innovation space in Washington, D.C. Innovation Leader, those of you that know what that is, it's a website. The quote from them is, we're more Google than Google. If I brought you to our space, and when you talk about people and hiring, I do this all the time. Every single person, I don't tell them, and I'm trying to convince HR to do the same. I don't tell them to go to our main office. I tell them to come to our office. We're in a different building from everybody else. You come up the elevator, you get off, and you're going to have an oh shit moment. You're literally going to come off the elevator and go, where am I? Right? This is not a nonprofit. This has got it feels like Facebook, if those of you that have been there, or Google, or like any of these things. It's crazy the feel you get. And so we built this space. And everyone said, why did you do that first? So, well, if we have to have an army of everyday innovators in aging, we have to sort of put our money where our mouth is. Someone said that this morning. How do you do that? How do you show culture? How do you show innovation? So the space was the physical manifestation of us putting our money where our mouth is for innovation. So every single one of our employees could see it, feel it. It just feels creative. You've been in spaces where you get a vibe, right? You walk in, you're like, oh, feels really creative. That's what it's called the hatchery. And it pays homage to the chicken coop. So we started there. I said, okay, we got to change the culture. We have to figure out how do we do this everyday innovator thing. And it seemed like a monumental task at the time because now we go back to people. Again, we weren't fraught with a bunch of hard-charging, entrepreneurial-minded people. We had a lot of social do-gooders. So how do you retool an entire 2,000 people? Well, we created a program called I6. There's a lot of talk about design thinking this morning. We went out and we created a training program, a methodology, a framework that we called I6. And it was basically teaching human-centered design techniques, lean canvas, journey maps, validation boards, and all that stuff that, IDEO and the Google and all those folks do. We created our own version. We trained every single employee. 6 months, 8 months. It was a quick process. And we said, that's good, but that's not good enough. So we created a program called I6 Champions. And the idea of I6 Champions is some percentage, and it happens to be around 10%, so roughly 200 people, have gone through extra training, superhuman design thinking, champion training. And these folks are all embedded back in the business units. And we let them self-select in, which was really, really important. We only wanted the people that had a passion for design thinking, a passion for innovation. So we have 200 people out of 2,000 embedded in the business unit, and they are the ones that we look to help champion incremental innovation throughout the organization. We took it a step further. We said, well, that's not enough. Because while we like to think we did a great job training the entire company and then training 600 or 200 people to be champions, still not sure. Because, it's one of those things, if you don't use it all the time, you kind of lose it. And so we created an internal consultancy. Right? Think of IDEO. It's internally facing, specifically for AARP. And the idea was, how do we help our partners across the business gain clarity on their product roadmaps at a very granular level? Because they didn't have that. And we would spend tens of millions of dollars on, quote, innovation with vendors and get zero ROI. So that's something we provide. Now, in doing that, we created an apprenticeship kind of model because we're leveraging these folks and people from across the company as SMEs to participate in design sprints that are happening all the time. Right? I'm going to give a shout out to my friends from Alpha. Alpha is one of the tools we use all the time in this process, and it's invaluable for us, so thank you guys. So we did this. We did this in a year. We still do it today. But we said, okay, that's great. We're starting to change the culture, but now we got to put our money where our mouth is and actually create products. So we developed a product development team. AARP has never really built a product. So those of you that know us, we take our name, and our friends from United Healthcare are here. We take our name and we put it on people's products. So United's Med Sup insurance policy is an AARP partner policy. We have Hartford for insurance. We have deals with Expedia and Denny's and movie theaters and all this stuff where it's literally a licensing model. Well, that's a very one-dimensional model that's very fragile. So we wanted to develop our own products and services. Our CEO, Joanne Jenkins, wanted to be the first CEO in the history of the company to launch our own product or service. So I went back into startup mode and entrepreneurial hat on and said, okay, I got to go hire some people. By the way, when we started, we were 3 people. After this process, we were 6 people. I have a team of 15 people that are dedicated to product development right now, and all they do is act as internal startup folks. Can't really see it too well, but on the handouts you'll get, you can see it. But we've actually launched 4 products in 2 years. The Let's Be Well thing on the left there, the box, we started from nothing. We built a curated wellness box business from nothing in 2 years. And I did that in parallel to some of this. Because what's really important in telling your story is gaining momentum and being able to tell that story and talk about your wins. Because if you don't have any wins, this goes away pretty quickly. Right? I think the research talks about 24 months. If you don't have any wins, your innovation's gone. So we started building these things. We got really good at it. And we said, well, venture math, for those of you that have ever dealt in venture math, 10 investments to get 1 hit. I can do about 3, maybe 4 at one time. Odds aren't great. So the team got a little bit bigger. We said, okay, we got to have this production pipeline. How do we have this machine that can kick out projects and concepts? So we now have a little bit of a machine that's doing that. And we also leverage some of this from the internal. We go off into the internal business units and we ask for what are the challenges you would love to solve, but you can't. You don't have time, you don't have resources, whatever. So we start to dabble there. So it looks pretty good so far, right? We're doing sort of transformational. We're helping with Incremental. We help to change the culture. But venture math still was on my mind, and I was like, that's not enough. We have to do more. And this story is pretty compelling, especially in Washington, D.C. There's not a lot of this happening. This isn't in Boston or San Francisco or New York. This is Washington, right? It's not what you think. So to hire people that can do this in Washington is a monumental task, right? It's just a different mindset, different type of people. So we said, okay, well, how do we change that? We changed that by trying to engage the startup ecosystem in a way that AARP had never done before. And a lot of you probably have some sort of startup engagement. You may participate in an accelerator program. You may go to demo days. You may do different things. But we said we have to really, truly engage them. This isn't just we show up, we write a check, and we can check the box on the Washington Post survey of best places to work because we're innovative. This wasn't a PR exercise. We had to actually do it. And we thought, well, if we're active in that ecosystem, not only are we going to get other companies to learn about what we're doing, but that's my talent pool of new people. Because I need entrepreneurs to come in to do my product side. Right? There's not anyone internally, or very few people internally, that have any of the skills that would be needed to do product for us. So how are you going to do that? So we call this pitch time. We took 2 paths. One was, let's leverage the power, the clout, the convening access that AARP has and run challenge statement-based pitch competitions. So think American Idol, only for pitch competitions. We've done this for 2 years now. So we did 5 stops around the country. And at every one of those stops, we're showing up with this picture, this message, which gets people excited. I ended up hiring some of the folks that just came to pitch events. Their companies, they had an idea they were working on. It didn't work. But now they're sending me resumes. So it works. And we look at, we always go to Boston and we always go to San Francisco because we have to. But we went to New Orleans, we went to Nashville. We did CES this year. We were the first time ever that CES did a pitch competition. We're doing CES again next year. The winners of all those competitions come to DC. We do a gigantic, it's actually October 15th and 16th. If anyone's in DC, you're welcome to come. A gigantic 2-day experience for the startups. AARP is actually not invited, and that's intentional, right? This is about telling the story externally to the investor community, to the innovation community, to the other startups, right? Because we want to engage them as much as we can, because that starts to tell the story of who we are and how innovative we are. This has worked so well that we actually have just launched a new service where we have other large companies coming to us and saying, how do you do this? Because we're trying to do it and we're not doing it. It's not working, right? So the other pitch time thing we do is we've partnered with 2 accelerator programs. Mass Challenge out of Boston, and we do the health tech program and the fintech program. I can say that I was never a big fan of accelerators. I didn't think they provided much value to the startups. And I think it had like this adverse reaction. Mass Challenge's health tech and fintech programs are vastly different. It's complete, the script is flipped. All the power resides in the startup, not with us. We just show up and say, someone help us solve for X, and then the startups get to pick who they want to work with. And so it's an interesting way to go about doing it. And then the other one is Upward Labs, which I think there's some folks from Hartford here that may know Upward Labs. Upward Labs created a really interesting program. It's all about pilots, because startups need to get pilots. They need to, it's not just, hey, let me mentor you. It's get me work, get me business, help me scale. And Upward Labs does that. So last year, or this year, I keep saying last year, this year, all of our programs start in January and they end right about now. We worked with almost 2,000 startups this year. And out of that funnel, we think of it as dating, right? We want to get to know them. Here's one of the really cool things about training a whole army of people in design thinking. As a reward mechanism, we enable our staff who are excelling and whose management wants to do this with the opportunity to work at a startup in a temporary extended team capacity, right? So you get to spend some of your time as a SME helping that startup get the product market fit. Probably the single best thing we did for retention. Maybe one of the best things we've done for attracting new talent too. When you tell them, hey, your job's this, but by the way, you get to go over here and play, and you get to go work with a startup, it's pretty compelling. But out of that, we actually will date for a while, so we'll, do we like you? Do you like us? Is there a there? Do we think we can co-create or collaborate on something? And if so I mentioned almost 2,000 companies through the funnel, we'll offer an equity stake in it. We'll do an equity deal with a company. We do not write checks yet. So you would think, well, does it work? Because you're not giving cash. We've never had a company say no to us. We now have 8 companies in our portfolio. We give them a $75,000 in-kind warrant. We take $75,000 in in-kind warrant in their business. And interestingly enough, those of you that do much with anything with startups or invest in startups, you'll often get asked to be like an advisor to a startup, and you may get like half of a point in the startup. And I know I have a few of these. And the reality is you don't do much. So for me to sell a startup, hey, I'm going to give you $75,000 worth of services from AARP. I'm going to give you access to our employee base, our SMEs, to help you get product market fit. And as part of that $75,000, they get access to some level of our membership, which we have 38 million members. It's a pretty easy sell. And then what ends up happening with these startups, the startup community is pretty small. So they start telling their friends. So next year when we go out to do pitch time, whether it's a pitch event or it's an accelerator program, we have people lined up. We have people already asking us, when can we get in? How do we get in? Where's the next application cycle? That's huge for us. So now in less than 2 years, maybe 2.5, we've gone from just an idea of everyday innovators in aging to creating a space that represents what innovation means to us, so it's a beacon for people to see and touch and feel and work out of, training an entire staff, changing the culture of the organization, building our own products and services, and engaging a startup ecosystem. So now, anytime we have a new prospect come in, this is what they see. Right? We sell them on this. This is the dream. Forget about what your job is. Forget about the job description, because that's just something HR makes us have. Right? We actually do shadow days. We make people come in. We do the behavioral interview thing because we have to do it because they make us, and we check the box. But then we invite the people in. You want to come and see what it's really like to work with us? You want to see what it's like? We treat the team's now about 25 people, and if you've ever worked in a startup, it feels like a family. That's what we've built. We've built a family. And telling the story becomes easy. I don't even have to tell it. I don't have to sell it. It sort of sells itself, right? And our ability to attract and retain A talent in Washington, D.C. has gone up exponentially as a result of this. So if you go back to what I said, the questions I asked in the beginning, what's the impact? What's your mission? Why are you innovating? Is it incremental, transformational, or both? How does that all come together to tell a story, to get to this picture, this placemat? That's what I would urge all of you to think about as you're going down the path, right? And in many cases, it may not be external, it may be internal. Like I know we talked a lot this morning about business units. So business units they're still stakeholders, they're still people you have to get on board with your journey, and you still got to get them to be excited about what you're doing. So that's the AARP story. I can tell you this is now the second time I've done this, and it actually works. First time I didn't know if I was just lucky. But this is the second time, and it was done on a much bigger scale than I did it the first time. So it absolutely works.